Yeah, it was a brilliant talk you just gave there, Ruth, in terms of controlling the house from miles away. I've got one of those Owl intuition devices for controlling the central heating from wherever you are in the world. I think out of all of the different devices of tracking energy usage and things like that, I think that's probably about the most useful one that I've come across. Because you can, if you go away on holiday, you can turn the heating off, and then when you come back, you can turn it on so your house is warm when you come back and you've not wasted any energy. Brilliant. Right, so I'm Marc. I'm a lead developer at Connect Group. This is kind of like an anniversary for me as well, because about a year ago I attended one of these meetups and I ended up applying for a job at Connect. And here I am doing talks as well. So I've been playing about with sort of single sign-on and OAuth 2 really only over the past 2 or 3 weeks or so. So just to set the scene, I'm not an expert, but I've learned a few things. I've learned a bit about OAuth 2, so I thought I'd just share it with everybody. And as is the theme this evening, there's a bit of Spring Boot in there as well. Just a quick poll: who's used Spring before? And anybody use Spring Boot? Oh, damn. So don't test me too. So the agenda is just explaining what single sign-on is, OAuth 2, what it is, how it works, a brief summary of the different available social OAuth integrations, and I probably won't go into much detail about Spring Boot because I think everybody knows about it. And then I'll just run through a bit of a live coding demo of getting a Spring Boot application up and running with OAuth 2 authorization. I guess another quick poll would be: who's used OAuth 2? Anybody? 1, 2. Okay, so hopefully a couple of people might learn something, and others will question my knowledge. So, single sign-on. It's a way in which allows you to authenticate using one username and password into many different systems. So, examples of this are, I've kind of gone with a fitness theme for some reason. I've got a Fitbit watch, so other fitness watches are available. So, Fitbit, Strava, Google, Plus, they all have sort of single sign-on mechanisms that use social integration. So that means that you can actually log into them without configuring your own username and password. You can log in with things like Facebook or Google. Behind the scenes, that single sign-on is using OAuth 2 to authorise your application to use your user account. So slide on OAuth 2 here. So the important thing to get from OAuth, which isn't necessarily obvious, is its authorization, not authentication, which is quite a significant point, to be honest. Although when you're using OAuth and you're using social login, you will have to log into your provider, like sort of Google or Facebook, but it's not really. You're logging in to authorise the application that you're using to be able to get your details and your login information. You're technically not really logging into your application, if that makes sense. When you're using it, you're effectively delegating the authentication to a third party. It's the likes of Facebook, Google, and Twitter. And the authorization aspect is really that you're authorizing the application that you want to use. You're authorizing that it can get access to your user account. One of the good things about OAuth 2 is it supports web, desktop, and mobile authorization. So it makes things easy if you want to integrate this kind of capability into many different devices. There's a lovely RFC link there if you want to get sleep. I guess the final point there is it's not really an advisable mechanism to use things like sort of logging by Facebook if you've got particularly sensitive data. You should really be handling the authentication and authorization yourself. Not to say that you can't still use OAuth, but yeah, don't go using things like Facebook. When I was looking through the spec for OAuth 2, there's 4 different what they call roles to do with the protocol. So they are resource owner, resource server, authorization server, and client. So I've just kind of provided a different alternative view of what that really means. So in the context of OAuth 2, a resource owner is the user of the application. And when they're talking about resource, what they really mean is the user's account, the user's information about themselves. So that's the resource. The person who's logging in, they are the owner with their own information, their own user profile. And if you think about this in the context of things like Facebook, what you end up authorising is the application to be able to gain access to all the information in your profile, your friends, your feed. So that is the resource. And the other 2 things here, the resource server and the authorization server, certainly in practice these 2 things tend to be the same server. The protocol kind of says that these 2 things can be separate. So the resource server in this case is usually an API that enables you to get information about the particular account that the user is logged in as. And the authorization server you'll see in a minute in the next slide is the thing that actually issues the token that gets passed around, which effectively sort of represents the authorization for your application to be able to access users' information. And then finally, in the spec, we sort of talked about the client, and the client isn't sort of us as an individual logging into a system. The client is actually the application, and yeah, this is immediately obvious when you're kind of reading through these things, because you might tend to think of the client as being the browser or the front-end application, but it's really that it's saying that your application, because it's applying for access to the user's account, it is effectively the client. So there's a diagram that sort of explains the process of OAuth 2 here that I carefully lifted from DigitalOcean's site. So it shows the application down the left-hand side, and the other 4 parts of the roles that I explained in the previous slide. So the bit that kind of happens before all of this, I guess, is when you kind of go to a protected page within your application, and you do have to actually sort of start off this whole process. If you're not already logged in, then you will be asked to log in. However, if you are already logged in, then the client will first off make a request to the user to say, can you actually sort of authorise this particular application to use your account. So for example, demonstration will give in a minute, which will be using GitHub as an OAuth server. You get presented with that kind of screen, and you'll see this in Facebook as well. It says, do you want to give this particular application access to your profile information? And that's the example of a GitHub one. So steps 1 and 2 is basically saying, do you want to permit this application to access your account details? Once you get the authorization grant, the application then needs to talk to the authorization server and say, can you give me a token so I can then use that as a token that will give me access to anything about that particular user. and then that gets used for all subsequent calls to the resource server to be able to get information about what it is. So what I was going to demonstrate here quickly is just kind of using GitHub's web services and kind of sort of demonstrate the different ways in which you can actually access GitHub RESTful APIs, both using sort of just providing the username and password on the actual call itself, and then actually requesting. What we do then is actually request a token, and you can then subsequently use that token. So be different holders at the same time.
Does the speaker stand if you want?
Sorry?
Does the speaker stand if you want?
I should roll that, wouldn't it? So, yeah, effectively here, this first call is just kind of to demonstrate it's an authenticated service that sort of GitHub provide here. So if you just call it without any kind of credentials, it quite rightly tells you to go away. So the API that they do provide you with, you can actually sort of pass in additional parameters to be able to get access to information about your user. If I can type the password in. So this is basically the resource that they're protecting and they want to protect. But this is also the resource that you can expose and use within your applications. However, the downside of this obviously is you don't really want to start sort of shipping with your application, particularly username and password. You really want to sort of delegate that away. So what we can do in this next command is effectively request from GitHub effectively an authorization token. Because this is recorded, I'll remove these later on. But you can see here the response from that particular method there, or that particular call, gives you a token, and it's that token that you can then use within your application with all the subsequent communications to GitHub. And say, right, actually my application is allowed to use GitHub and to pull out information from it, and that's effectively the authorization period. One important thing to point out with all of these things, because if you have access to that, if you're not using HTTPS, people can sniff that, lift it off, and then they can basically impersonate you. So you need to make sure that all communication between your application and services like GitHub is over HTTPS. So we're using the original user service that we had before, but this time instead of needing to provide usernames and passwords, we can now provide the authorization token, and we've now got access to my profile. I guess the final line there is effectively what the applications will be doing behind the scenes, is actually pushing that authentication token within the HTTP header. So again, it's not something that you would actually see on the URL as such, it's embedded within the packet. So yeah, a brief bit about these tokens. Obviously lightweight because they're just like a universally unique identifier. So paid to the clients, they don't really know what that is, other than it's just an identifier that can be used to authenticate or to represent authentication. And then again, you need to be doing these things over HTTPS for security purposes. So kind of mentioned probably most of these already so far. So there are a number of different providers out there that sort of allow you to integrate with. So yeah, like Google, Twitter, Facebook, etc. So the demonstration in terms of code that I'll be doing now will be sort of over Spring Boot. So for those of you that haven't used Spring Boot before, it's basically kind of a layer on top of the Spring framework. So the Spring framework, most people probably know it for things like dependency injection, but it does actually provide you with an awful lot of other capabilities. So if you're working with databases, then sort of use Spring data type libraries. When you need to secure your application, then there's other modules there. Yeah, there's loads of stuff that you go to their website and sort of see all of the different functionalities that they provide. But sort of Spring Boot kind of puts an additional layer on top of that that simplifies some of the configuring of the application and enables you to kind of get up and running a lot quicker. So they'll have sort of maybe POM files that are generated that are effectively what they call opinionated. So it gives you, for a particular version of Spring Boot, it will give you all the dependencies that they know work together and work together nicely. So you don't have to have all the faffing around with maybe dependencies and making sure that there aren't any problems. So yeah, the second part of this demo, these are effectively the things I'm going to be running through. So yeah, I'm going to create an application from scratch, kind of demonstrate the adding sort of basic authentication to that app, adding sort of an annotation, a small amount of configuration, and then through just doing those couple of things, you can then see how kind of easy it is to actually integrate with GitHub for So within IntelliJ, there's quite nice integration for Spring Boot. It allows you to keep those things that you can see on the next page just about. So these dependencies here allow you to effectively select the mailing dependencies to be able to sort of configure your application with loads of different pieces of functionality. There's stuff, a lot of stuff for cloud these days. There's a load of data modules for interacting with different database systems. What we're going to do here first off is just literally create a very simple web application. So that's the main one that needs to see. So what I'm just doing now is just creating two simple files. Initially, both of them aren't going to be protected at all. But what I'll then do is sort of add the configuration in to protect these two, or to protect the dashboard, which is in the secure file.
settings going to go for 80? Well, that's 80 already.
Yeah. That'll be the pre-demo demo that I did about an hour ago. There we go. So that's basically it. At the moment, 2 different pages, fairly simple, all unsecure at the moment. So the next stage is to effectively add in the sort of Spring security comms. So there are 2 here. One of them is a Spring Boot starter comm, which just adding that sort of does a number of things behind the scenes just to actually sort of secure every single page for you. So you don't need any other configuration other than literally dropping that dependency into the application. So if we drop that in and restart the application, you should find that the entire site is now protected behind some basic authentication. IntelliJ to actually implement the additional jobs. So as soon as you add Spring Boot security in here, it sort of just configures you a default password with which to use during development. And that's another one of the things that sort of Spring Boot does to make your development a lot more rapid, is you don't have to sort of go to the effort of configuring passwords just to get up and running for demos or proof of concept and things like that. So then need to do is go out to this, refresh it, then you get sort of prompted for authentication. So literally just to log in, use the username user and the password which is in the console, and then within the application, and everything is authenticated. And the next steps will be to add OAuth itself. So what we need to do first is basically sort of log into GitHub and actually tell GitHub that you want to create a brand new application with which to permit to use GitHub for OAuth. So if we go into the settings within GitHub itself, you'll see sort of down the left hand side there's sort of authorised applications that can gain access to the resources in GitHub. So what we need to do is jump into the Developer Applications tab and register a new application. You can see I've done this once or twice before. And what this ends up doing is when you actually complete that registration, you get given a client ID and a client secret. And it's that client ID and secret that your application then needs to use to basically say, yeah, I'm configured in your system, so you need to let me in and give me access. So, 2 things that we now need to do within our application to get it working with OAuth. There is an annotation that goes in the application itself, which is SSO, and then within the application properties itself, you need to provide a number of pieces of information. So we Look at that. It's really dark blur, isn't it? So the first two pieces here, you've got the client ID and client secret. So those are the things that I need to update in a second that come from GitHub when you register for your application. And then there are three so you've got the URL here, sort of the access token is where Spring will, on your behalf, for the application say, right, can GitHub please give me an access token so I can access the user information. And this other URL down here is basically say if the user hasn't yet authorized your application to use the account, then this is the URL that you need to go to. So there, if you want to then integrate with other social sign-ons, then you sort of add additional properties in here for all of the different URLs for things like Git, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and all of the other types. The challenge a lot of the time is actually digging around to find the URLs that you actually need to place in here. So, there is one missing. Realise there's a third URL that was missing. So that final one is basically the URL that we were using on the terminal earlier on, and that's the one that is really the resource server URL. So that's allowing you to get information about the user that's logged in. So those three URLs, once you've got those configured within those properties, that's pretty much what Spring needs to be able to get home up and running. So just copy and paste client ID and the client secret from within GitHub. Save that. Down, then log out of GitHub so at least you can see how it works when you very first go into it. Happened very quickly there was so at the moment every single page within the application requires sort of authentication to be able to access it. So when we went to index.html, Spring recognised it's a protected resource, so therefore the user needs to be authenticated. We're using OAuth 2, and because we're using that page that you would have only just seen was sort of the Git authentication page. Because I'm using LastPass, it just logged in straight away. And then this is basically the authorization challenge. To basically say to the user, are you happy for this application to access your information? So as soon as we hit authorize application, we will then sort of logged in and using OAuth 2.
You're going to click on secure dashboard. Sorry? You're going to click on secure dashboard now. Yep. It works.
So both of those pages at the moment are effectively Devil secured. So the kind of the next step to this is effectively to sort of add some configuration within your application to sort of start to define rules about which parts of the site require authentication and which parts don't require authentication. So do that very quickly. I guess also if you kind of log into GitHub, you'll notice that you're actually logged in straight away. So that is the single sign-on aspect. You are actually logged into GitHub, so therefore you're logged into this application as well. Likewise, if you restart the server, One thing we haven't got implemented here is any kind of logging out functionality. So you do that, you kind of remove straight away because you're logged into Git. So that's a single sign-on aspect, and the other aspect is the OAuth too. So another couple of things that we can do here, I'll kind of do them at the same time. A lot of what kind of I've learned here and I'm sort of presenting back to you is there's a presentation by or a tutorial on the Spring site by a guy called David Sayer, I think his name is. And he's kind of done a similar tutorial, but it uses sort of AngularJS as a front end for the client as well. I think although that's kind of useful, it kind of ends up detracting from what's actually really going on. And Angular, it makes it less clear about sort of the interactions that are going on. But one of those things that you can, certainly if you've got a REST-based application that uses RESTful web services to get information out, is you could expose a web service that effectively provides you information on the user that's currently logged in. So if we do create a very simple RESTful web service that sits on the endpoint /user. When we restart this, so we're using REST controller annotations, so that's setting everything else up for us. All we need is just like a simple annotation to be able to get a RESTful web service using get the domain /user, and that will then return a JSON object for us. So we don't need to have to do any marshalling and unmarshalling of Java classes to JSON. The other thing I wanted to put in here quickly was also so what these two things are doing, so basically this is what's called sort of Java-based configuration. So a lot of these things used to be sort of hidden within sort of XML or properties files, but now using sort of Java config, you can actually configure your application to do things, but do it within code. So effectively what this is doing is basically configuring this application to always permit anything that's on / and index.html, to not require authentication or authorization, and then everything else does require authorization. This would need, in a real application, you need to sort of take that a step further. So if you've got CSS, you've got JavaScript, etc., then you need to sort of add additional parameters in here to make allowances for those as well, because you don't want to be authenticated to pick up the CSS. What we're doing now is restart that. Currently now it should be signed out of GitHub, so when I actually refresh this page, it shouldn't try and sort of ask me to log into to GitHub, and then when I'm moving to this secure page, it should then request authentication, and it's now authorised this app using GitHub. So the final piece here is what I did with that request mapping was to add a web service that allows, say, sort of some front-end JavaScript to be able to pull out information about my GitHub user profile or my Facebook user profile. So as long as I'm authenticated now, if I hit sort of /user, it's now giving me the same JSON object from GitHub. So if you wanted to display the user's name, you've got that at the main. If they haven't hidden it, then you'd have your email address and everything else in there. So it gives you a lot of information that you can then display and use in your application. So that is pretty much it. So yeah, it's just a set of links in terms of the APIs that I use with GitHub, the useful tutorial on the Spring site about sort of Spring Boot and OAuth 2, and yeah, GitHub URL for getting access to the project. So are there any questions?
How did you find the documentation for Spring Security?
Interesting. Challenging. I think I'm slowly developing a bit of a love-hate relationship with Spring. And this is kind of almost like a good example of it, in terms of it is actually really quick to get things up and running, and certainly good for sort of prototyping stuff, I think. But then once you sort of want to get into more and more detail, I find the documentation is quite tricky to actually get information out of. Is that your same experience, or?
I've just found it painful.
Yeah.
Spring Security particularly was more painful than the others.
Yeah.
It seems that they've gone out their way to hide documentation of Spring Security. So
Yeah.
trying to
You almost need to sometimes reverse engineering their examples and their sort of presentations that they give, and even simple things like sort of the Java config, where you're trying to sort of exactly work out how you need to build up that configuration. It's quite challenging as well.
Works well if you stick to the examples. You get beyond that, you're digging into their source.
Yeah, as long as you do a Spring Boot app using AngularJS, it's secure and you'll be okay. So, yeah, I still do love the framework, and yeah, it's not without its pitfalls like everything else. Okay, any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.